But tonight's speaker has hundreds of these stories. He's a master of storytelling for business. He's a master of creating content that is rich with stories, sort of content that will give you exposure, build your business, and build your brand. And the more I've gotten to know this guy, I've noticed he's extremely persistent, but that's a good quality of his. He's an international keynote speaker. He's been a marketer now for over 2 decades. He's interviewed some of the world's most renowned entrepreneurs, and that itself has a whole bunch of amazing stories attached to it. And so you know you're in safe hands tonight when he presents to you. And so with that, ladies and gentlemen, here to tell us all about storytelling for business, will you please put your hands together and give a very warm welcome to the one and only Nathanial Bibby.
I'm going to start with telling you a little bit about my background for those of you that may not be familiar with my background. And I'm going to go as back as when I was this little chap here. I was about 6 or 7 years old then. We lived in Hong Kong. I'm originally from England. I don't know if you can tell the accent or not, but we lived in Hong Kong, and that's my sister on the other side of my dad there. And when I was 10, we went to boarding school here in Perth. And I remember, like, when we lived in Hong Kong, my dad would we would go to work on Hong Kong Island, and we would actually live on a residential island where they didn't even have any cars, just golf buggies. It was all full of expats and families. And I remember my dad was taking like 75, 80 flights a year. I remember thinking when I was waiting at the ferry pier for Dad to come home from work that there must be a better way to grow a business than flying around the world entertaining clients all the time. And so, as far-fetched as it seems from what I'm doing day to day, the reason that I do what I do is to keep families closer together. And since then, I've worked with Westpac, Channel 7, Apple. I mean, these are big companies, and we work with small businesses as well, and I've seen the impact of that. 2019 was an interesting year for me because I won, first of all, Best Use of LinkedIn at the Social Media Marketing Awards, which I'll be completely honest with you, no matter how confident I sounded walking into that awards evening, I did not think I was going to win. I was up against guys that had spent millions of dollars, agencies that spent millions of dollars on the campaigns, and guess how much I spent on my campaign that won? Donut, zero. No money on advertising. I was shocked. And then I followed up, but the Social Media Marketing Institute ranked me #1 LinkedIn expert in Asia Pacific, which is pretty cool. So I got dubbed the LinkedIn guy, right? I have been a marketer for 20 years. I'm on LinkedIn not because it's my platform and it's what I do. I don't work for LinkedIn. They don't pay me any commission. It's where I'm getting the best results. So if tomorrow it's door knocking, I will be out knocking on doors, and so will my team. So in 2011, if I'm not mistaken, there was a study called the Significant Object Study. Anybody heard of this by any chance? Okay, one person, cool. 2 people. So the Significant Object Study was basically a study where they got 200 objects off eBay for around about $1 each. And then they got 200 authors to volunteer to write a story for each one of the objects. And then they would resell them on eBay and see how much they sold for. So what do you reckon? Do you reckon the price of the objects went up with the story? So this horse's heads in particular, with 99 cents, was sold for $62.95 with a story attached to it. Something like my grandfather owned this and it's sentimental, blah, 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 blah. 200 items, $250 turned to $8,000. How is that possible? So I went to see James Bond. Who's seen a James Bond movie before? Show of hands. So I saw James Bond and he's driving this Aston Martin and he's fighting all these bad guys and he gets all the hot women, and I thought, do you know what? I want to be more like this guy. I like this guy. And so I walked out of the cinema and I'm walking down the street and there I saw it in the window, the same Omega watch that James Bond was wearing in the movie. So I went in, bought the watch, $15,000. And I walked out of the shop feeling more like James Bond. How is that possible? How much money is being spent on product placement in the movie business? $10.5 billion per year. Is it fair to say that storytelling might be more powerful than some of us anticipate? We're going to move on to how to create stories and how they benefit people in making buying decisions. I'm a marketer. I think of marketing like a customer journey. So you've got awareness, consideration, decision, purchase, advocacy. That's the way I think about marketing. And so let's have a look at where storytelling fits into the customer journey. Has anybody seen a scenario like this before? With a bride and groom getting married and somebody starts laughing and can't stop? It's not actually that uncommon. What's happening is she's so happy, there's so much dopamine in her head that she can't control her laughter, the amount of endorphins that are going around. So you've got brain chemicals like endorphins, dopamine, and oxytocin. That is why I bought the Amiga watch, and that is why those products sold for $8,000 when you'd only bought them for $250, because the brain chemicals were released. And we can do the same thing, all of us can do the same thing through storytelling. When you experience dopamine in your brain, you've got more focus, more motivation, and your memory's better. Would that be a good state to put a prospect into, or somebody that you're meeting in a business meeting? So if you're sharing facts and figures with people, they're not going to go into the dopamine world, they're going to go into the cortisol and adrenaline world. And we're going to go into what that does to the brain in a little bit. Oxytocin. So somebody that's very close to me had a baby recently, and she's got a lot of this flowing around. Oxytocin is naturally produced with mothers when they give birth, when they're breastfeeding, and so on. You can create oxytocin by telling a story like I did at the start about when I was younger. Because if you relate to it and you have empathy, it releases oxytocin, which creates trust, generosity, bonding. Could be powerful tools, wouldn't you say, for sales and marketing. Endorphins. How do you create endorphins? Any ideas? Somebody would know this. If someone's been to the 7 steps of LinkedIn influence, they would know this. So you make people laugh, like these clowns down the back here are doing. And when you release endorphins, funnily enough, somebody cracks a joke and you start laughing, you're more focused, more relaxed, and you become more creative. There's only 4 ways that you can add value through content. Who posts on social media regularly? Raise your hands, just so I can get an idea. Instagram people? LinkedIn people? Facebook people? Oh, is there still a few of you? Okay. Information, inspiration, entertainment, and education. So on LinkedIn, what we see is like a lot of information, and we see a lot of education. I think education is really valuable, but there's a lot of people doing it. If a comedian went onto LinkedIn and started entertaining people and producing endorphins, they would crush it because no one else is doing it. A lot of people think that in marketing you should follow the herd. And a lot of people look at what everyone else is doing online and they follow it. But 95% of businesses fail within 10 years. So if you're following what everyone else is doing, it's the only way that I can think of where you're guaranteed to fail. You've got to be doing what the minority are doing, or doing something completely different. That's where the opportunities are. Oh, no comedians go on LinkedIn. That's a silly idea. It's a fantastic idea. I remember actually, in the start of my career 15 years ago, when I was working in web design and search engine optimization, I had a client come to me who was a vegan bodybuilder from Tasmania. And I said, that's not going to work. If I bumped into him again, I bet you he's a millionaire. Because it's exactly the kind of business that would crush it in today's economy. So why do so many marketers and businesses fail? We're impatient. We want results tomorrow. We want to get rich quick, right? We've got enough time to do it over and over again, but we haven't got enough time to do it properly. The LinkedIn Heroes series, which she'll just mention briefly, where I've been interviewing entrepreneurs, right? If people knew the amount I have had to go through to interview, just interview, not sell to, not do business with, just to interview people and then post it on social media, don't want to do it. And that's the only reason why there's not many people doing it, is because it takes a long time to build a brand. It takes a long time to build trust and build enough trust until you're relevant. When you're relevant, you've got something called permission marketing, and permission marketing is very foreign to most marketers. Permission marketing is when people expect to receive content from you. They know what kind of content they're going to receive and they want to receive it. Most marketers are impatient, so they interrupt people. Interruption marketing is on its way out. It's not quite dead yet, but it's on its way out. So in the old days, you could spend as much money as you possibly can on TV and you would win. You would build brand because you interrupt enough people. These days, the control of attention is in the consumer's hand. There's only two reasons why people buy from you. There's only two reasons, two things. Attention and trust. There's only two things why people would buy from you. So yes, you can get their attention, but you're not going to hold on to it if you don't build trust. So this is the second reason why marketers and businesses fail. We're selfish. 9 times out of 10, when I look at people's social media content and they ask me, what am I doing wrong? What am I doing wrong? It is all about them. And they can't get it through their head. Well, what do you mean I've got to add value to the other person? What do you mean? No, I want to make money. I want this tomorrow. I want to do this. And it shows in their content. Like, why would anyone choose to follow you if you're just talking about yourself all the time? It's actually not about you. And so it would be naive to think that you can create a content marketing plan on your own in a room with a whiteboard, wouldn't it? If you find out who your audience is and you know who your audience is, they should be the one that's designing your content marketing plan. What are their problems? What are their fears? What are their frustrations? What entertains them? What kind of stories do they want to hear? It doesn't have to be something different and unique that no one's ever done before. In fact, it probably isn't. But you need to find out what your audience wants, because what your audience wants is different to what my audience wants. No one knows my audience better than me, and I'm sure that I don't know your audience as well as you do. A lot of people will look at advertising on social media and go, LinkedIn is expensive, or Facebook is getting more pricey, or Instagram's free. And all that stuff is kind of irrelevant when you look at the figures of how many people trust the content on the different platforms. So people trust LinkedIn twice as much as Facebook. Is that not worth twice as much? Well, it could be. It's 3 times as much as Instagram. So if you've got 30,000 followers on Instagram and only 10,000 followers on LinkedIn, which is more valuable? It's just something to think about. So the thing that I think we need to keep in mind is it is about implementation, because knowledge is absolutely useless unless you execute. And those of you that know me know that I'm big on execution. I fail quickly, but I make sure that I get the outcome by failing fast. And so write down your stories. And you may write down 50 of them. That's totally cool. Everybody's got stories. It's just some of us don't believe that our stories are worth hearing. And if you write them down and then you categorize them into what emotion you're starting out with and what emotion you're ending with, then you can start to apply the right story to the right scenario to get the right outcome, if that makes sense. Because all we're trying to do in a sales scenario, or when we're speaking from stage, or when we're marketing, is we're trying to take somebody from one emotion to another emotion. And so they're not going to do it with facts and figures, no matter how convincing they are. They'll do it with storytelling. So write them down. Okay, has anybody been in love before? The most powerful emotion of all. When you're in love, and at the early stages of love, wouldn't it be true that your partner could do eat an apple and you think the way that she eats the apple is absolutely phenomenal. And she could ask you to take out the trash and you'll be like, yes, no problem. And then what happens a few years later? I hate the way she eats that apple. Why does she always ask me to take the trash out? Because at the early stages of the relationship, the brain chemicals are being released. You're basically drugged. This is all about neuroscience. So stories activate 7 areas of the brain, and only 2 areas that facts do. So more brain activity means higher attention to the topic and retention of the information. Because unless somebody experiences emotion when they consume your content, they won't remember it. They just won't. So you've got to design your content in such a way that it triggers some sort of emotion so they feel something inside, so they actually retain it. Because you've got to have enough empathy to understand, like, okay, yeah, my content's awesome. I did this awesome white paper with all these statistics about our industry. It's a fantastic white paper, but no one is going to remember it. And if they're in the awareness stage, they don't even recognize that they have a problem or a need yet. They're probably not even going to read it. So when you do a video on social media, after 10 seconds, if 100 people press play, on average, after 10 seconds, there's only 50 people still watching, on average. So you've got to be pretty good to get more than 50% of people watch past the first 10 seconds. Now, I don't know if you've watched many videos on social media from business owners and marketers, but like a lot of them, right, this is how they go. So they get their phone out and they go, hi, happy Friday, hello Facebook, here I am. Today I'm just gonna talk about, oh, hi Jody, let's start saying hello to people and stuff like that. And then 10 seconds is gone. And if the copy was good enough that people actually press play, 50% of people are gone. And so they look at how many people viewed their video. It's not a very good indication of how many people actually watched it. Guess how many people are gone after a minute? 80% on average. So, 12-minute videos, they got to be awesome for people to be watching them on social media. YouTube would be a bit higher, but not on social media. Do we think that when you're having a business meeting, for example, or somebody's watching your content, what brain chemicals do you think they're experiencing? Is it dopamine, oxytocin? Yeah, it's probably cortisol, the stress chemical, right? So when you're having a business meeting or someone's consuming your content, you do not want them to have cortisol flowing through their system. Okay, this is really interesting. So there was a study that was done around how often we actually touch our phones. And I wanted a few of you to guess what this number is on average. Per day. 2,000? Not bad. 2,617 times a day on average with this particular study, okay? Tap, swipe, and click 2,617 times a day. If you're not marketing on this platform, on this mobile device, you're going to be dead in the water pretty soon. I mean, there's going to be a lot of disruption going on, right? Because all of these businesses that are marketing on TV and newspaper and radio, and you've probably heard a lot about this, they need so much evidence, for starters, to move the big portion of their marketing budget over to something new. Second of all these executives, they've got what they call a confirmation bias. Confirmation bias is basically like, I was right before, so I'm still right. They've got a bias to what worked in the past. And so they don't accept things that work in the future. But you cannot ignore statistics like we just showed you then. And so what's going to happen is very soon, a whole wave of money is going to be dumped into social media. And all of that free attention that we've been enjoying and complaining about, taking for granted, will be gone. It's going to become a very competitive marketplace. And the only thing that's going to differentiate your brand from someone else is storytelling. Everything's going to be commoditized. Has anybody got Google Home or any of these audio things? I haven't got one yet. But isn't it true? Like when you want to order like a pizza, right? You're going to have to come up with a restaurant or a brand name. And so how are you going to choose which brand name when you haven't even got a list in front of you? It's just going to be branding. So the only thing that's going to differentiate, and I think there's going to be a lot of businesses, a lot of small businesses go under. So it doesn't work, right? Okay, let's talk about what brain chemicals are released, well, what flows through the system when cortisol and adrenaline are released in the brain. So people become intolerant, irritable, uncreative, critical, they have bad memory, they make bad decisions, and they get stressed. Anybody been in like a situation where they've had a stressful day and they just know it's not a good time to enter a conversation? Anybody experienced that before? Yeah, of course we all have. Cortisol and adrenaline are being released in your brain at that point. Most of the time, when prospects will walk into a business meeting, they've just come off the subway or they're consuming content on the subway or at an airport while they're waiting to get their flight. These are the things that are going through their system. And so you've got to be able to find a way to shift that in order to get a positive outcome. Otherwise, they're just going to judge you, be critical, and be pissed off.